welcome back to Betty. I'm your host, Cynthia Thompson. I don't know about you, but I'm a very busy young lady. But you know, we all need to take time to do some form of exercise. We have aerobics, we have weightlifting, we also have yoga. Did you know that yoga was a form of exercise? I have a yoga instructor here with me today, Leanne Smith, and she's going to explain to us all about yoga, what we do and do not know. Thank you for joining me today, Leanne.
Thank you.
So, Leanne, what is yoga?
Oh, it goes back. I mean, yoga is tens of thousands of years old. It just the poses that you see people do in the magazines and things like that, how it's become popular in the West over the last 100 years, is just from the physical part of the exercise. And so it's about connecting your breath and your body and your mind all together in one. So it's not just about what's going on physically, but all around wellness.
You mentioned that it came over to the Western continent. How did it even start?
Oh, it was based on a meditative practice, people that wanted to, connect a little bit closer to spirituality and to their religious beliefs. And so it was about creating a connection. And the poses were just created to further enforce that. And so about, I guess it was probably 1890, we had some teachers from India who came and started popularizing it in the West. And so from there, they created some students here, and it's just taken off since then. Yeah.
So what's the primary goal of yoga?
For everybody, it's different. For a lot of people, it's about the physical exercise, and it's about becoming stronger and becoming more flexible. For some people, it's about relaxation and about learning how to breathe and lowering your stress and getting a little bit better quality of life. So it just depends on what there's many different kinds of yoga, and so depending on what it is you're looking for, you can tailor your practice to what you're looking for.
So what are the different types of yoga?
There's power yoga and hot yoga, which is what I primarily teach, and those are a little more physically strenuous, right? A little more intense. And that's for, many people find that to be really helpful because you can kind of get it all in one place. You can relax and you can calm down and you can sweat all at the same time. So that's one way to do it. There's, meditation yoga where you're just primarily sitting and focusing on your breath. And then there's, other kinds which are alignment based, which are just about getting your body to work more efficiently.
So what is the hot yoga? You mentioned that. How do you do that?
Hot yoga is practiced in a room typically between 95 and 102 degrees.
What?
Yeah. It's not as bad as it sounds. And you'd be surprised what your body can tolerate. But it's practiced in a room that's pretty warm. The purpose of it being warm is just because, like anything, it is going to move a little better when it's warmed up. If you want to mold glass, you have to heat it up. And so that's, if you kind of think of your muscles that way, that they're going to be really tense and they're going to be really stressed. And if you can heat them up, things will start to relax. And plus, you sweat a lot, so it's a good way to kind of get the toxins out and get and just put yourself in a controlled environment where you can experiment a little bit.
Leanne, we've been talking a lot about yoga. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about some of the positive side effects of yoga. Okay?
Great.
Betty, I'm your host, Cynthia Thompson. I'm here with a yoga instructor, Leanne Smith. And before we went on break, Leanne, I was asking you, what are some of the positive side effects of yoga?
Some of the positive side effects, people tell me that they just are, it's easier for them to get through their daily life. It teaches you, it's not, like I was talking about earlier, it's not just about a physical exercise, and so it kind of changes your lifestyle a little bit. You get less stressed out. The little things aren't quite as, as big. Exactly. And so you become, just a little more relaxed. And that's really what I think we're all, trying to do is move through and get your day done without, creating a big scene around it. But it's not only that, but I mean, there's physical, of course, benefits, because your physical body is going to become leaner and more efficient and more flexible and a lot stronger. And when you can have flexibility and strength, you injure yourself a lot less and move through your day a lot better. I've had students that have been able to decrease their blood pressure medications and completely come off of them. It helps to reduce just that constant feeling of stress, and so it's able to bring all that down. It's all in all, I mean, I do it for a living, so I must believe in it, right?
So how long have you been doing yoga?
I started doing yoga in my last year in college, so I've been doing it about 8 years. I've been teaching for about 7 years, 6 years, yeah.
6 or 7 years? So Leanne, I know that breathing is a big part of yoga. Can we do a breathing exercise sitting here?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. Whenever you want to start your breathing exercise, you want to sit up nice and tall, right? So you want to elevate through your spine, because anytime that the spine is rounded, if you think of your spine like an antenna, right? Anytime the antenna is bent, right, the signal gets flustered, right? So you want to be able to sit up nice and tall, crown of your head kind of floating over your shoulders, and we breathe through our nose in yoga. So you want to try to make sure you take long breaths in through your nose, long breaths out through your nose. So take a nice big inhale in, and just release it through your mouth and let it go, right? So then you can start the exercise. So take a nice deep breath in, and then try to let it out with the exact same force and for the exact same length of time, right? And maybe tiny little pauses at the bottom, right? Tiny little pauses at the top. So creating, in yoga it's called samvriti, but it's this equal parts, right? So inhale for 3, out for 3, in for 5, out for 5. And the more that you build the strength in your lungs, just like any other part of your body, your lungs can be worked and exercised. And so your breath can increase, maybe for a count of 10 or 12, and then start to let it out. The more, and of course, the less you breathe, the more efficiently you'll be able to move, and the lower your heart rate will get.
Do you find that more athletes are doing yoga now?
It's become definitely a lot more prevalent because people are realizing that if their athletes are, again, if they're strong and they're flexible, they're going to get injured a lot less. And when they injure themselves less, they play more, right? And so then they don't have to be out, and it's, it creates more focused athletes. It creates a lot more stamina in whatever it is they're doing. I work with a lot of high school and middle school athletes, and then I have friends who work, for the Panthers or work for the Bobcats, and so it's getting there. It's getting there, so it's good.
So in the future, you see more and more people doing yoga, maybe?
I hope so. I hope so. It's one of those things where you have to get the word out about it, because there's misconceptions, just like any form of exercise. If you don't believe, if what you've heard about yoga is that it isn't going to help you, then you're probably not going to do it, right? But if you can make it a little bit more prevalent, if you can see it in the news and see it in the magazines and see it out on the street, then it's going to gain some,
Yeah, because you have a
momentum.
lot more actors and singers, other different artists. They're doing yoga and they're really promoting it. Like there's a rapper that does it all the time.
Oh, well, Russell Simmons is a big yogi.
Yes. You call them yogis?
Yeah. He's a big yogi. He practices in New York at a studio called Jivamukti. So yeah, I've had a few friends that have run into him up
really?
there. Yeah. So he's a big time practitioner, and I mean, it's always good to have a face that people recognize talking about something that you want talked about.
So where do you see yoga in the future?
I'm hoping that it'll be a lot more recommended by physicians and by other people who do other forms of exercise, that you can promote. If you're a weightlifter, you can promote yoga as a way to cross train. So hopefully the conversation will just get a lot bigger.
So Leanne, we've talked a lot about yoga. Do you have a few minutes to show us a few of the yoga positions?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'll let you show my audience some positions,
okay? Sure. Great.
Okay.
The first thing you want to make sure that you do before you begin your yoga practice is make sure that you're nice and warm. So most important thing to remember is to start that nice deep breathing that we were talking about earlier. So I'll begin with a basic sun salutation. So you'll stand comfortably on your mat, really nice and tall, shoulders back and down. And with your inhale, lift your arms up overhead. Try to look up at the ceiling. And then as you exhale, fold forward all the way down. With your inhale, lengthen your spine about halfway. And then exhale, fold again. And just repeat that 2 more times. Inhale all the way up to standing. Arms reach up to the top. And then exhale, fold. If when you fold, your hamstrings feel really tight, feel free to separate your feet and soften your knees. Right? That's a great way to be there. With your inhale, lengthen your spine. Exhale, fold again. For the last one, I'll show you from the side. That way, you have a little bit more of a view, right, of how you want to feel. So with your inhale, come all the way up, arms reach up to the top. And then exhale, slowly fold, maybe soften your knees. Inhale, halfway lengthen, and exhale, fold. Then come all the way back up to standing, and then bring your hands down. So typically in a yoga class, we'd do that 3 or 4 times, and then we'd move forward into the second step of the sun salutation where we start to move around a little bit more. First one you'll see, probably a very familiar pose, is downward facing dog. So we'll come into downward facing dog. When you come into downward facing dog, you'll start from your tabletop position, hands and knees. Hands are about shoulders width apart. As you tuck your toes, you'll slowly begin to lift your hips and press them toward the wall behind you. Again, in your downward dog, if your hamstrings are tight, you can soften your knees and separate your feet. Relax your shoulders down. We'll come into warrior 1. So looking in between your hands, step your foot way forward between your hands. Take your left heel and turn it down flat. And then with your inhale, slowly reach your arms up to the sky. Right? You might hold here for 3 or 4 breaths. Try to come down as low as you can in that right thigh. Get really strong. Deep breathing. Take 1 more breath, and then slowly bring your hands down and step back to downward facing dog. And then we'll repeat that on the second side. So looking in between your hands, step your left foot forward. Right heel turns flat, gives you a nice base, and then slowly reach back up. And again, very nice deep breath. Every exhale a little bit lower. Then 1 more breath in, and as you exhale, slowly step back, downward facing dog. If your shoulders get tight in your downward facing dog, you can always come back to your tabletop, just regroup, come back and approach it again. All right, so returning to downward facing dog, we'll come back into our warrior 1, looking forward, step your right foot in between your hands, left heel flat, come all the way up. As you move into warrior 2, you'll start to turn your hips open, reach your fingertips out, and soften your neck, soften your shoulders down. You can look forward or you can look out over your extended right thumb. Try to come down a little deeper. Take 1 more breath, and then slowly bring your hands down and return to downward facing dog. Just think of your downward facing dog as your home base. And then slowly, stepping up to the top, come all the way up to standing, arms reach up. Right. You can approach all of these postures from the top down as well, right? So if your shoulders feel tight, you don't have to come from downward facing dog, that's not important, right? So if you're coming into things from standing, you'll separate your feet nice and wide, right? Turn your front foot forward, turn your back foot in a little bit, and then slowly start to sink down, right, until you gain the mobility and gain the strength. Fingertips reach out. Right, so your heart rate goes up, you'll start to breathe a little bit more. Things will start to happen, right? You start to sweat, I'm out of breath, right? The more that you work, the more efficient it gets and the better that you feel, and you start noticing the difference, right? Because if you think that, your yoga practice is not going to be enough to keep you interested, you just have to keep returning to the mat. You have to keep giving it some time, right? Just like anything else with running or with cycling, the first time that you stepped out onto the track, I can imagine how it went, right? The first time you got on the bike, however it went, but just give yoga a chance, right? So we'll do some standing practices to help work on balance, and balance comes and goes. So don't get frustrated if balance comes and goes and you start to fall over. What's the worst that can happen, right? So we'll come into tree pose. So putting some weight into your right foot, just start to practice putting some weight there. Maybe you lift up onto your left toes and see what that's like, right? If you start to fall over here, not a big deal, right? Over some time, you'll start to maybe bring your heel in to your calf, kind of like a kickstand. Feel your inner thigh opening just a little bit, right? Once your balance starts to feel a little bit better, you might take your foot up onto your calf, right? And there's equal pressure coming in from your leg and from your foot, right? So I'm still standing up tall. If you still feel good and you want to move a little bit further, you want to skip over your knee and then slowly bring your left hand to your inner thigh, right? My right leg is working to help me stand. My left foot is pressing to help keep me stable, right? You can keep your hands down, or maybe you bring your hands into the center. And for a last step, just to bring it up a little bit more, hands can reach up overhead. And maybe you look up. Take one more breath, and then slowly come down, right? And we'll just switch sides. So again, if you're a beginner, taking your heel and pressing it into your calf, and just feel this, right? Because it's not about standing on one leg. It's about feeling stable. And wherever you feel stable, that's where you stop, okay? So maybe slowly bringing your hands up. And maybe looking up to the sky. And bring the hands down. All right, so we're all nice and warm. We'll come into a few more poses just to create a little bit more flexibility, create a little bit more openness in the hamstrings and in the quads. We'll come into triangle pose. So again, from standing, separate your feet nice and wide. We'll turn our right toes forward, left toes in slightly. We're going to leave our legs straight this time. Reach your arms out, right? Shoulders come down. Reach your right hand as far forward as you can. And then slowly bring your right hand down onto your right leg. Left hand lifts. And start to look up. Right? If you feel less flexible, you can always bring your hand up a little higher. And then over time, when your hip starts to release, you can pull your hip back and bring your hand down further, right? So just being where you are and being okay with where you are, that's the key to a successful yoga practice, right? To push yourself to your limit and stand there and be okay, right? Going past your limit is not going to do you any favors, okay? So we'll repeat that on the other side, bringing your left toes forward, right toes turn in. Reach forward and start to come down. Still breathing deeply. If you start to lose your balance, you can always look down at the floor, find your balance, and then start to lift your gaze and look up. And then slowly come back into the center. Now, any yoga practice that's really going to feel comprehensive is going to end with some poses that you do to stretch and relax all those muscles that you just worked. So coming into some exercises that are more restorative. Right? And this is hard for a lot of people. It's hard to stand still. It's hard to be quiet, right? But there's a really important reason why we do that, and that's so that we can let all that work sink in. So, we'll do a few poses on the floor. So just coming to seated, and you'll bring your feet out in front of you, bring your feet together, and let your knees open like a book. Now, if your knees are way up here, it's totally fine. You can slowly, over time, the knees will start to come down. You might rest your hands on your feet. And then over some time, you'll be able to lean forward and fold a little bit more. This might feel good to your lower back, and if it does, you can bring your feet out a little bit further in front of you and continue to fold. And try to stay in each pose for about 3 or 4 breaths. Okay. So the next pose we're going to do, we're going to work on lengthening through your hamstrings. So what you'll do is you'll take your legs out, stretch them in front of you. You can have your feet together. If you have low back issues, you can always separate your feet a little bit, soften your knees. With your inhale, long spine, inhale, lift up, look up. And then exhale, slowly begin to fold, reaching for your toes. If you don't get your toes, you can always bring your hands onto your shins and just rest, okay? And I'll show you from the side. If you turn to the side, you'll be able to see that what you want is a long, tall spine. So the first thing is not to just round forward and collapse, right? You want to always start from a really strong base. So with your inhale, lift the heart, look up. And then with your exhale, far forward as you can. And this is as far as you go today. That's perfect. Okay? And again, spend 3 or 4 breaths here, more if you can. Okay? One more breath, maybe a little bit further. And then slowly begin to sit up. All right, so the final pose that we'll do, we'll start to open up our shoulders a little bit, to open up our side bodies as well. So sitting in any comfortable seated position. You'll bring your hand down to the side, start to put a little bit of weight into your palm, and then lift your opposite hand up and overhead. So feel that lengthening on your left side. Take one more breath, and then slowly come back up. And then we'll repeat that on the second side. Left hand down, right arm reaches. And then slowly come back up. So if there's any doubt in your mind as to whether or not this is something that you can do, the answer is always yes. You can always find a way to be in these poses. There's a million different ways, and it doesn't have to look like the magazines, right? You can always, when you attend a class, go see your instructor before class and let her know what's going on, let him know what's going on, and they'll be happy to offer you some modifications or some adjustments or some props that might help you move deeper into the pose. So if you think that it's not for you, it probably is for you, right? So give it a shot. If you're a runner, if you're a cyclist, if you have any other forms of exercise in your repertoire, right, it's a great way to help you to move further and help you to deepen those activities that you enjoy. So I hope to see you in class.
Wow, Leanne, those moves look real simple. Simple enough for me to even try and do it. I've only done yoga once, but I think I can do it now. I want to thank you again for joining my show.
Absolutely.
And please stay tuned to A Better You every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. here on Public Access 21.
Thank you.
You have to tell us to stop.
Okay.